Hey, what's going on, guys? Today is a good day. Today I will be reviewing this 2015 Camaro RS, and I'll be showing you guys what I think about it, showing you guys the exterior, interior, and a little bit about how it drives. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first, we are gonna get into the history of the Camaro. So I got a couple points that I want to go over just before I review it to give you a little bit of context on what this vehicle is to GM and what it's about. So we'll get into that right now.
So I wanted to go over the history of the Camaro and its previous generations to again give you guys a bit of context on what it is. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So there are 6 generations of the Camaro. First generation, model years from 1967 to 1969. The Camaro was made to compete with the Mustang because GM's previous pony competitor, the Corvair Monza, wasn't large enough to accommodate a good engine. Now, GM actually had a very interesting announcement for the Camaro, which I'll get to later in this section. Now, this first generation Camaro is the second most iconic as far as visuals go, in my opinion. I think it just looks like a real solid muscle car. Alright, now let's get into the second generation Camaro. Model years from 1970 to 1981. Now the second generation Camaro was larger than the first. It was also based on the Ferrari Lusso 250. And honestly, what do you guys think? Do you think GM did a good job? Do you see the resemblance to the Ferrari Lusso 250? Now, based on what I read, this second generation Camaro started really strong as far as sales, but it got worse and worse each model year. Driving.ca named this generation Camaro the worst of all of them, especially toward the end of the 70s, stating, "The end of the decade saw the once mighty Camaro reduced to a caricature with function-free sticker packages and leaky T-tops." Alright, now guys, let's get into this third generation Camaro, model years from 1982 to 1992. This Camaro took big steps toward modernizing the Camaro. This was the first Camaro with fuel injection and the first model to have a 4-cylinder engine. They ditched this for a bit, but it reappeared in the 6th gen. This one also had a vastly different design from previous models, and honestly, it's probably my favorite retro design. It honestly kind of looks like a Pontiac Firebird, although all the early Camaros were based on the Firebird. Cause you know, Pontiac, Chevrolet, all under GM. Alright, now let's get into this 4th generation Camaro, model years from 1993 to 2002. Now this one had poor sales due to low interest in sports coupes, which in turn caused GM to discontinue the Camaro after this. This one was very curvy, and honestly, it's my least favorite Camaro of all of them. Alright, now let's get into the 5th generation Camaro, model years 2010 to 2015, and this is the subject of today's video. Now this model year marked the revival of the muscle car for GM. They got the Camaro back, and Dodge also brought back the Challenger a couple years before this, so things kind of started to heat up in this era. We'll go more in depth about this generation Camaro in this video. And honestly guys, this generation along with the 6th generation are probably my favorites as far as looks on the outside. As I'll go in depth a little bit more during the video, man, I really do love this design. Now, as I had mentioned previously, GM held a teleconference and had a very strange announcement for the first Camaro. GM sent a telegram to about 200 auto journalists saying that there was going to be a big meeting named CPAW, Society for the Eradication of Panthers from the Automotive World, and that this meeting would be the first and last. The journalists were very confused. The meeting was actually the first time different cities were connected via live telephone, and I think there are about 9 cities in this conference. It was a meeting where they unveiled the Camaro brand. Very, very strange way to unveil a new car. The first thing that comes to my mind are the Apple events and Steve Jobs just on the stage. Also at this teleconference, GM announced the Camaro is French slang for comrade, implying that the car and driver were quote unquote best buddies. However, after doing a little bit of research, Camaro means absolutely nothing. Go figure.
Okay, now that we have gone over history a little bit, now I want to get into the specs of this Camaro. So it has a 3.6 liter V6, which is really decent for what it is. 323 horsepower, really nice. 279 pound-feet of torque. So if you want to put a trailer on the back of this thing, I guess you can. Transmission is a 6-speed manual or 6-speed automatic transmission. Shifts pretty good. I haven't noticed anything. And it gets 20 miles a gallon, which for a car that goes this fast with 300 something horsepower, that's not bad at all. I'll take 20 miles a gallon any day. Okay, so let's get into this exterior. So guys, moving on to the outside of this vehicle. Honestly, it is a beautiful car. And I remember when this concept first came out in like 2006, or even better, I remember I played the game Midnight Club LA, and it was one of the flagship cars on that game, and I thought it was ugly. But looking back at it, this thing is absolutely beautiful, man. It's got this sporty look, but at the same time, it looks like a muscle car, so it's two of them combined, and it's beautiful. It's got the V-shaped front end from the first Camaros, which is cool. It's got these sick 20-inch rims on it, looking good. And overall, the body design is very reminiscent of that first generation Camaro. Absolutely beautiful. This rear quarter panel area definitely vibes of the 1967 Camaro. Moving around back, pretty standard. Nothing too much going on here. It's got these LED rear lights. Got the dual exhaust. But yeah, man, it's a really nice design. Whoever designed this thing, he did his thing. Give that man a pay raise. All right, people, moving on to the interior. And one thing that I noticed right off the bat is how cheap the materials are in this vehicle. Cheap plastic everywhere. Cheap plastic. Some kind of faux leather, which is honestly a little bit better than the cheap plastic, but again, cheap plastic. This thing is not very good from a material standpoint. Now, what I do like is that these gauges are like circular, and they're very reminiscent of, again, that first generation Camaro. And I think that was a point in GM, you know, when they came up with this concept, they were kind of like, hey, we should give it that old nostalgic feel, that old 1967 Camaro feel. And I think they did a pretty good job in some areas. You know, this gauge cluster being one of them, that front end design, and really the entire outside design, that matter. Now, this infotainment screen is not very good at all. And it is a 2015, so I can't be too harsh on it, but man, like these capacitive buttons, you gotta press them a couple times for them to work, and that's no good. I'm always a person that likes actual buttons to get that feedback, to know when I press it, it presses, and these capacitive buttons are not very good. Another thing, visibility is not good. It is not this vehicle's strong suit. Looking out the rear window, and you can even see from right here, it's like really small. And that is one of the biggest gripes that I have with this.
Alright guys, so summarizing everything up, I do like the 5th gen Camaro, and I think it's a real cool sporty car. It symbolizes the revival of the muscle car. It incorporates aesthetic elements from older generations while still being a modern sports car internally. Some pros are that it has really nice design, it's rear wheel drive, and it's pretty fast given the cost. It's also iconic, being in several races, and also being really the main star in a Transformers movie. Where it lacks is the interior, where the materials are not great, which is a common theme in GM vehicles from this era, and really any era outside of the new GM vehicles. Also, steering and overall handling are not this vehicle's strong suits. If you are somebody with a limited budget and want something that's cool, it's fun, this probably is the car for you. On the other hand, if you're somebody that can splurge a little bit and want something with a good interior and all the other positives mentioned before, you probably can spend a little bit more money and get you a BMW or Mercedes-Benz. My final verdict is that compared to its competitors, I do believe it's the best looking one, but overall, I think the Mustang and the Challenger have it beat in all. Thank you guys for tuning in. Peace out.